losing by a dime. A couple of field goals at the end, and they got right back in it at the end, Luke. But 5 runs in the 9th inning, no one was awake to see it, correct, on Wednesday night?
I was. Maybe a few other people, but, yeah, if you were awake for that one, then, well,
Whew.
Maybe you work third shift or maybe you work second shift. But, it's amazing. As we continue to watch these games, you keep waiting for them to start playing some better baseball. And I'm not talking about a turnaround here. I'm just talking about winning 2 games in a row, which they're approaching a month since the last time they did that. How about winning 3 of 5, 4 of 5, 4
They
of
won
6.
a series this weekend. We talked about that earlier in the week. Come on, they won a series already this week.
Well, but at some point in time, they've got to start playing a little bit better baseball. I mean, they just have to. They're on pace to lose 119 games right now. I don't think they're actually going to do that, but
well, they were losing 9-1 in the 6th inning, last night. So, that's no way. You're right. When it's 9-1, I don't know who's watching or who cares, but it's not relevant. That's for sure. It's not something. I'm not going to have that instead of Colbert at midnight, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, people are going to go to bed, or if they are awake, they're putting on something else, whether it's basketball or hockey or.
Well, when you're 8-20, you're lucky they put you on to begin with at midnight. Let's start with that, right? Like, I don't know where this goes 30, 60, 90 days from now, but this is taking us right back to when Andy McPhail was, giving sweater speeches on video online, right? I mean, that's how bad this is. It's historically bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's been terrible. Beyond just if you're a fan of the team or you're a baseball fan, I mean, yeah, you're not going to tune in. And even if you are, you're not going to stay tuned in when you're losing 9-1, which, let's face it, when you're losing 9-1, even good teams that are losing 9-1, people tend to turn that off. So if it's not going to be a close game, people aren't watching, period.
Well, if I would have told you, wake me when they get within 3 runs, you would have woken me at 1:21 in the morning, right?
I still wasn't all that confident. I mean, there was.
I went back and saw your tweets, though. You had some level of, a 3-run home run and a grand slam. We're right back in this one.
Well, I was being flippant. I didn't actually think that was happening.
Late night comedy with Luke Jones. You can find it on our Twitter at WNST.
Anything to get you through the game, but just going back to it, Dylan Bundy.
Yeah, we'll start with Bundy, right? It wasn't a great night for him.
No, I mean, second straight start for him. I did not see his last start because I was eyeball deep in draft coverage that night, but stuff wasn't overly crisp. Velocity was probably down a tick, not a whole lot, but just didn't have that electricity to his stuff like that he normally has, and left some pitches up, didn't locate, and Mike Trout and Albert Pujols, they made him pay, and then later on in the game gets into some trouble. A lot of it dictated by his defense, and then he gives up another home run that kind of busted the game wide open. So, as much as things have been bad across the board, Bundy's been one of the few bright spots, but even now he has faltered here his last couple times out, and I'm not panicking about it. I mean, he wasn't going to pitch to a sub-2 ERA all season long, or at least I wasn't expecting that. So, you want to see him get back on track, but man, it is just the bright spots are so few and far between at this point. I mean, Machado, Bundy until the last 2 starts, Richard Blyer. Other than that, there's just not a whole lot to point to right now to be positive about this team on so many different levels. And it's very, very frustrating to watch. And I think you just see Buck Showalter's demeanor, his body language in the dugout, and we know Buck over the last 6 to 7 years when things have gone really well, things haven't gone well. He's been very even-keeled, but you just know this has to be wearing on him. It's wearing on everybody. I mean, no one wants to go out there and be 8-22 and.
I wonder if Buck's ever been 8-22. Buck's always had competitive teams, hasn't won a World Series kind of famously, but if you go through his track record, in the years he got fired, even 8-22 is probably new on Buck. I mean, this may be something he hasn't experienced since Mobile or since the New York Penn League in 1974 or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it. I mean, Arizona's first year, remember, they famously made the playoffs very quickly, second year, third year, whatever it was. I think maybe that year. I mean, he's had a couple years where he's had some rough teams, certainly, but
yeah, I'm going through his years here. Arizona Diamondbacks were 65 and 97 in their first year in 1998. Then they won 100 games, second year, then 85 games. Texas, he was 71 and 91 first year, 89 wins, 79 wins, 80 wins gone. Yankees, I mean, even when he left, they were over five. There were 14 games over 500 his last year there, and of course he left them in a position to win the World Series the next year.
Yeah. I mean, it's
so this is new on him. Really, literally, like you know what? They stunk here in 11. In 11, they were 69 and 93 his first year here.
Right. I mean, he's managed some bad teams before, but to your point, a stretch where you have lost 22 of 30. Let alone that happen at the beginning of the season. And then
they're not going to make it to 400, right? Like, I'm starting to do the quick math on this. Like, what 400 would be 66 wins, right?
Yeah.
That's 400.
I mean, there's a lot of season to go for them to turn around to do that much.
65 wins. I'm sorry, 65 wins is 401. I just did the math on it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they got to get to 65.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they're going to start playing better at some point. They're not going to lose 119 games, I don't think.
I don't know. An injury to a pitcher or two, and then you deal Machado and you deal Jones, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
You really think that's possible? 109?
No, I think they should deal Machado tomorrow morning because I don't know that they're really going to get a better deal on July 31st.
I don't disagree with that, but we're talking about if they're going to lose 119 games. I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, they might lose 100.
It depends on who's in the lineup, man. I mean, tell me who's in the lineup in August and September when they're playing the last 60 games of the year. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think there's any way to know the answer to that because they don't have anyone really running the place. There's no one to even ask what the plan is because I don't think they really have much of a plan at this point other than let's try to win tonight, which we've all been there. Half the people in our listening audience are just trying to pay their bills this week. Let's just win tonight. Let's just get through the day. I think that's where the franchise is for the next 90 days. Let's just not try to lose 119 games. Let's do all we can do, And I don't think that there's any long-range plan here, but the Machado thing, we've been wondering for that for a long time. But if they do trade him Monday morning to literally, which they could do because they feel like they're going to get this great value from the Dodgers, and I don't think that. I mean, Ken Rosenthal doesn't think that, by the way. But if they're going to be dealing away parts earlier, this I feel like they're going to lose 100 games now. I mean, you're arguing 119. I mean, that's kind of a ludicrous argument on my part. That some really bad things would have to happen, but to your point. Injuries will happen, and then they're going to deal some players off, maybe sooner than later if they were smart.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've already had injuries. I mean, look at some of the guys that are missing right now. I mean, Jonathan Scope's been out, close to 3 weeks. Zach Britton hasn't pitched yet. Trumbo just got back. This team's been bad, unlucky. I mean, go down the list. They've faced the whole gambit of bad things happening to them, and on top of just not playing well. So, when does the worm turn in that regard? I'm sure it will to some degree at some point. And as far as the Machado thing, well, they're 8-22 with Machado. My point is a lot of other guys have to inevitably just start playing a little bit better. And that's, again, I'm not talking about a turnaround here. I'm just talking about a little bit of prosperity. I mean, this is where the Orioles were in 2010, and they were horrible for the first 4 months of the season, 4.5 months of the season, and then Buck Showalter showed up and they played better at the end of the season. Now, doesn't mean that's going to happen again this year, but it does speak to it being such a long season. And at this point, you point to it being a long season and you're saying, wow, there's 5 more months of this garbage. But it is, it's just incredible to watch this right now and to see the number of just individuals like Vielma or Sardinius or different guys like that who don't belong in the majors, Anthony Santander.
I was getting ready to say to you, it's funny you would be so brazen and so flippant. I was looking at the lineup and saying, Craig Gentry's probably not a major league player. I'm not sure that Chris Davis is a major league player right now, over 600 at-bats, that any team would send him out there for 600 at-bats, and he might hit 178 doing that. He might hit 23 home runs too, but he might hit 178 doing that if that's the direction they're going to go in. I mean, this is This is woeful, and the weird part is the pitching is not as bad as we thought it was going to be all offseason, quite frankly, right?
The pitching hasn't been that good. You're not the only one who said that, and
the difference is that Cobb and Cashner break up the 5-man rotation that used to be Mike Wright and Tyler, or whatever the hell his name was, Wilson, or whatever his name was.
But statistically speaking, they haven't been that much better. My point is, when it's been good, it's been really good, but they've still had a lot of starts where it's been terrible. And I think the factor that's canceled out the very minimal improvement with the starting pitching has been the bullpen's been horrible, other than Richard Blyer, and O'Day's been pretty good for the most part, but he's had hiccups and he's given up a couple big home runs.
Maybe I shouldn't be so nice to the pitching. I mean, Mike Wright's not a major league pitcher. Aruo's not a major league pitcher. Clearly, Chris Tillman most nights isn't a major league pitcher.
The funny thing about you say that, I hear you, but Araujo, when you consider he's the last guy in the bullpen now because they're at a point where they've jettisoned Cortez, I'm guessing Mike Wright's going to be gone from this roster at some point sooner than later.
His ERA's 8.
But think of, you never have 7 studs in the bullpen. I mean, let's face it, you never do. Even go back to 2015, 2014, they still had a T.J. McFarland at the back end of the bullpen. If you actually watch him, he's one of the few Rule 5 guys that they've had over the last 5 to 6 years where I get that they see something in him. Now, doesn't mean he's going to stick, doesn't mean he's going to be an all-star closer 3 years from now, but I at least watch him, and he misses bats, and he gets strikeouts, and he will have a decent outing, and then he'll make a mistake at some point. He'll give up a run. And I'm not saying he's been great, but I at least look at him and say, he actually looks like someone who could be something really good in a year or two, compared to some of these other Rule 5 guys like Jason Garcia or McFarland or Nestor Cortez, or where you just say, this is just a guy. This is just a guy that they've thrown in their bullpen. So, I'll say that much for Araujo, but overall, I mean, the collective, this collection of guys that they have on this roster right now, it is just, it's sobering. And then on top of that, established major leaguers who have track records, who have been successful in the past, and you're seeing what they're doing or what they aren't doing. It just makes things that much more depressing.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST. And on a brighter note, it's football season here. I know this because it's all we're talking about on our Facebook and our Twitter, and Lamar Jackson and rookie camps this weekend, and Brashad Perryman. Cue the taps, huh? I mean, they've added to that room. They've changed things there, huh? Kind of quietly on a May Day, right?
Yeah, and I mean the news on Wednesday was that the Ravens aren't picking up his 5th-year option. That's not news. We've known that for probably a year and a half, that they weren't going to pick up a 5th-year option that involves paying him more than $9 million. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen. The real question, and this is what remains to be seen, is whether Brashad Perriman's even on the roster this year. When you consider he's owed a roster bonus early on in training camp, that pays him some real money that the Ravens can save on that. I mean, he's owed a bonus on, I believe it's the 3rd day of training camp, for about $650,000. And short of him looking like the number 1 receiver that the Ravens dreamed that he would be when they took him 3 years ago, or short of 2 of the receivers that they added via free agency or the draft going down with injuries in the spring, which is entirely possible. I mean, look what happened to this team last year. Short of scenarios like that, I have a really difficult time seeing Brashad Perriman on this football team even during the preseason, because I just think you look at the numbers, you look at how disappointing he's been, you look at the fact that they can actually save roughly $1.6 million in cap space by moving on from him. There's an argument to be made that you cut him now, and you don't run the risk of him having an injury that then leaves you on the hook for paying him money. So it really is. I mean, the 5th-year option thing was elementary. There was no newsworthiness to that. That's why we didn't even send out a WNST.net text on that one, because it's a what kind of a situation. But the real question with him is is he going to be on this roster in 2018? And at this point, all signs are pointing to no, but I guess there's no harm in taking a look at him now. Even if he gets hurt, you're not paying him lucrative money this year, but you take a look at him in the spring, see if the light bulb has gone on. And I think the bigger factor is, how do the other receivers look? Does John Brown go out and pop a hamstring, which has kind of been his MO the last couple years, which is one reason why he was available on a one-year contract? Do the two rookies look like they can be something, or do they both look very, very raw and look like they're going to have a tough time even making the football team? So those are the scenarios, those are the paths for Brashad Perriman to be on this roster at this point, but it's really, really difficult envisioning him being around beyond the start of training camp, especially with that roster bonus owed him.
Yeah, it's crazy we're still talking about him to some degree, right? Because there's so many other warm bodies in the room. And someone said, I was talking to one of the national writers last week, and I'm like, they quit on him in November when he was a healthy scratch, and they were trying to make the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
4
out of 7 weeks he was a healthy scratch down the stretch. I mean, think back to the last game. Jeremy Maclin was hurt. Michael Campanaro had gotten hurt late in that game. The Ravens were playing for their lives after giving up the touchdown, the ultimate choke that we've seen this team have, and they had Mike Wallace and Quincy Adebojo on the field. Quincy Adebojo, who had just been activated from the practice squad and had no idea what he was doing out there. The Ravens felt he was a better fit to be on the field than Brashad Perriman, who was a healthy scratch that day when they knew that Maclin was unavailable. So,
well, you're only a first-round draft pick for so long, and then all of a sudden you're a depth chart guy, and that's what he's become in Matt Elam. We've seen him around here, and I think we were spoiled the first 15 years, and, looking at Travis Taylor and Mark Clayton as the ultimate bust. I mean, this guy's, put a whole new title on it, I think.
Yeah, and Perriman, and I'll remind everyone of this because especially in this new era where the cool thing to do is to beat up on Joe Flacco and pick on him and blame him for all their problems. Well, Brashad Perriman, the only wide receiver the Ravens have drafted on day one or day two in their last 7 drafts. So, why we're talking about this whole wide receiver thing every year, this is an annual problem. Well, they've drafted one receiver in the first, second, or third round over the last 7 years. That's Brashad Perriman. So I rest my case as far as that part of the whole argument and sticking up for Joe Flacco a little bit, at least on that front.
Well, and, you've vacillated on Flacco. You've been, fair, I think, for results, but also, you get into his head and say, where is he right now? And he hasn't spoken out. And this is new water for the Ravens, and I don't know how they're going to handle this. And certainly, they certainly acted like Lamar Jackson's the next coming. You and I have, talked it back and forth, and Joe will be fine with this, and he'll go out and play. I'm sure he will be. But this was a slap at him last week, and to your point, you wrote about it before and after. There are 10 other guys on the field with him, and he has had a couple of injuries that he didn't have the first 8 years of his career. And I get that they need a better backup, and I think it's a week out on this, taking this thing in. You go to Joe Flacco and say, Joe, what happens when you roll your ankle in week 5? Do you want us to lose the rest of the games, or do you want us to have a better quarterback? So I guess that was the same question we were asking when Matt Schaub was here and John Beck was here, and guys that were backups Mark Bulger backed up around here, and nobody knows what he looks like, right? So we had that whole era where that happened. We're just not in that era right now.
Yeah, but the problem here is Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson couldn't be more different quarterbacks. So, the one argument, and we talked about this a lot last August when Colin Kaepernick was the big topic of discussion, but what Joe Flacco does in an offense is not the same as what Lamar Jackson does in an offense. So, again, I think it makes it problematic to develop Jackson in the meantime. And under the scenario that you present, you're going to be changing your offense pretty dramatically if Flacco tweaks his ankle and has to miss even 2 weeks. You're not going to ask Lamar Jackson to come in and play the same exact way as Joe Flacco. I mean, be a disservice to him. You'd be wasting his best strength. So I'm very skeptical how this whole thing's going to work out. And as I've said over and over since the Ravens traded up into the 32nd pick to take him, I'm not anti-Lamar Jackson. I'm anti virtually every circumstance around him And I know some of the arguments that are made as far as Marty Morningwig and Greg Roman and quarterbacks that they've worked with. But beyond that, there are a lot of other variables that I'm really concerned about as far as making this whole thing work. And as far as in the meantime, him being the backup, again, how many reps is he going to get? And I know you had Andy Benoit on. I know he's written about that. I've linked to something he wrote about a year ago, which it kind of explains why rookie quarterbacks play and play soon in this day and age. One of the big reasons why is you don't get a whole lot of practice reps. So how are you developing a guy if he's just standing and holding a clipboard or running the scout team? So I think...
the fifth year is interesting for the Ravens to have grabbed him in the first round, right? Like, they almost got him on scholarship to some degree because of that first-round designation. We talk about Perryman, the fifth year being denied on him. That's an interesting part of this thing that shows the Ravens' smarts on this.
Sure. I don't disagree, but at the same time, you need to start learning about him quickly enough. You have to decide on that fifth year before his fourth season, as we're finding right now with Rashad Perriman. So, that's why, to me, this notion that he's going to sit more than 1 year, I think is crazy. If that's actually their plan, then I think they're even crazier than I thought they were to draft him in the first place, because you need to find out about him. And kid's not going to develop by not playing. I'm sorry. I don't buy that whole line of thinking anymore. You don't get enough practice time. Once the regular season starts, Lamar Jackson's not going to be getting starter reps, I don't think, unless things are going that badly. So how's he going to get better? You can talk all you want about meeting room and a little bit here in practice here and there, but I think at some point you just need to find out. And that's where I, to a degree, respected what Brian Billick did with Kyle Bowler, that, okay, play him. If you drafted him, you have that much conviction to take him, then play him. If you don't have that much conviction to play him soon, then I question how wise it was taking him in the first round. And I know the fifth-year option, but you still gave up 2 second-round picks then in order to secure this guy. And contrary to popular belief around here, because their second-round picks haven't panned out, those should be some good players that you're using with those picks. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, I'm very skeptical of the whole thing. It's not the way I would have proceeded, but I still question how you're going to get from point A to point B, and I question if you're putting your best foot forward trying to win now when you use 2 second-round picks to move up and get this guy. And I think even from a post-Joe Flacco standpoint, you look to next year, no second-round pick, $16 million in dead money on the cap. It's going to be tough initially putting a better roster around Lamar Jackson, and you're going to need to do everything you can around to put good things around this kid to give him a better chance to be successful.
Well, and also that you have the $16 million cap hit on Flacco too, right? Or did we
I mentioned $16 million in dead money, and people have pointed to, you can do a post-June 1st, and that's true, but you're not going to have that access to that cap space until June 1st.
What's the cap? What's the cap this year in the league?
What was that?
What's the cap number this year?
This year for Flacco?
No, for the team.
They have roughly, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $8.5 million right now. Once you put into account the rookie numbers, they don't have a whole lot. They're already approaching that territory where if they want to make another signing of any note, they're going to have to probably restructure someone or get the Mosley extension done to lower his number, something like that, because they're kind of in that territory where they have $5-6 million once you take the rookies into account, and you want to have some of that money to take into the season because you're going to have some injuries and you need that rainy day fund, so to speak.
Well, the question I was actually asking, what is the cap for the teams? It is $177.2 million this year. It's gone up from $155 in 16. So it's going up almost $10 million a year. It went up from $167 to $177
but it goes up
this
that
year.
much for everybody, so it really doesn't.
But my point is, $16 million in dead money sounded like a whole lot when the cap was $120. It's going to be $190 next year. Not that $16 million in dead money's not a lot of money, but I was trying to figure out where that number was because I haven't looked at that number in a couple of years. I knew it was 150, 160. I was going to say to you, it's getting up on $200 million now. It'll be 185, 188 next year, and if they have to take a $16 million hit, that means they play with $172 million, right, against the league. That's a huge number. I'm not going to say it's not, but
sure.
It's not what it used to be. And honestly, when's the last time we've ever played with any kind of massive dead money around here? That hasn't been a big issue.
2015, they had a ton of it.
With what
Ray Rice, Jacoby Jones.
Forgot about him.
I go back and look. I mean, Haloti Nada.
But a lot meaning how much? Like $1 million here, $3 million there. Well, Haloti would have been a number.
No, they were probably up in that $16 million range.
Really, as a team.
Well, remember they had to cut Ray Rice. I mean,
the Ray Rice thing, I have forgotten about the internal finance. I only saw that on the field to some degree, but you're right.
But if you recall, I mean, and what happened? They went 5-11 that year because the roster wasn't great to begin with, and then they had a ton of injuries. So I mean,
including their quarterback, their $20 million quarterback.
Well, they were. Remember, they started 1-6 even before the injuries. Really, other than Suggs and Perriman, they were 1-6 before the injuries just piled up, and then it became silly season after that. But but my point is, it's where they stand with Flacco, with Lamar Jackson. I mean, it's when you have a young quarterback, you want to be able to build the best possible roster you can around them, and I still see a lot of holes, long-term questions about this roster, and if you turn it over to him next year, you're going to have some things working against you in that regard.
I'm on a link from March 5th, right? So the beginning of free agency. We're only going back here, 60 days, and the amount of money the Browns, the Jets, the Colts. I mean, the Buccaneers had $69 million in cap money, and you wonder how Ryan Jensen, why, you know what I mean? Why they give him, it doesn't make any sense to us, but, the Ravens have $8 million, and they have $70 million, and the Browns had $109 million, and the Jets had $90 million, and the Colts had $73 million. It's incredible when you stink and you don't have any good players. You don't have a Joe Flacco. You don't have $25 million wrapped up in your quarterback. You just don't.
Yeah, and that's why when you take a rookie quarterback, you want to maximize that competitive window when they're on that rookie deal. We've talked about it over and over the last 6 or 7 months with what Philadelphia was able to build around Carson Wentz.
Well, the Rams have done that. They are the poster child for this year. They've got a real quarterback, and they went and spent a whole lot of money in the offseason, right?
Yeah. I mean, you want to maximize that window because everyone knows once you do pay that quarterback, it becomes that much more challenging. And I'm not just talking the Ravens, but that's the case with other teams. And don't use Tom Brady as an example because he's the exception to the norm. He doesn't play for market value in the way that all these other quarterbacks do. So that's why it makes things that much more difficult once you have that quarterback that's making 25 and in this day and age of approaching $30 million a year. It's that much more difficult to build a roster. That's why these young teams, when you take that quarterback, that's why they don't sit long, and that's why you want to try to build that roster as strongly as you can early on before you have to cut that guy a check, and then a lot of those other players are going to go away.
He is Luke Jones. You can find him, Baltimore Luke, on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net, and he is up late with the Orioles. The good news is you get Chris Tillman on a Thursday night in Anaheim before they head to Oakland this weekend. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do, branches throughout Maryland, and a unique hands-on approach to banking. Also, our friends at Cole Roofing doing our Be More Positive Thursday morning community and charity chats. We're going to be talking to Flowers for Power, a whole bunch of Powers, as well as other charities this week. You can find all that in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.